And as Nada said, this is the last of Marianne's coverage with you of the Kitab-i-Aqdas. We're going to begin with educating us on a mystery. So let's have Patsy read paragraph 157.
Behold, the mystery of the great reversal in the sign of the sovereign hath now been made manifest. Well is it with him whom God hath aided to recognize the six, raised up by virtue of this upright Aleph. He verily is of those whose faith is true. How many the outwardly pious who have turned away, and how many the wayward who have drawn nigh, exclaiming, all praise be to thee, O thou, the desire of the worlds. In truth, it is in the hand of God to give what he willeth to whomsoever he willeth, and to withhold what he pleaseth from whomsoever he may wish. He knoweth the inner secrets of the hearts, and the meaning hidden in a mocker''s wink. How many an embodiment of heedlessness, who came unto us with purity of heart, have we established upon the seat of our acceptance, and how many of an exponent of wisdom have we, in all justice, consigned to the fire. We are in truth the one to judge. He it is who is the manifestation of God, doeth whatsoever he pleaseth, and abideth upon the throne of he ordaineth whatsoever he chooseth.
These words speak directly to the great reversal. Patsy, be prepared to read note 171.
Okay, 171.
When it says God doeth whatsoever he pleaseth is a theme that runs through Baha'u'llah's revelation. God shall not be asked of his doing, and God in our day is Baha'u'llah. There are two notes with this particular paragraph, and they mention Sheikh Ahmed along with Sayyid Kazem, who are the twin lights who prepared the way for the twin manifestations of God. We won't read note 172 because it only explains what 6 and upright Aleph are in respect of the Bab in his advent and Baha'u'llah. Well, actually, just in respect of the Bab and his advent in numerical terms. Now we're going to look at the great reversal with note 171.
Sheikh, do you want me to read the title above that? The mystery
Yes,
of the
please.
great reversal and the
Yes.
sign of the sovereign. Sheikh Ahmad Asai, excuse me for mispronouncing, 1753 to 1831, who was the founder of the Shaikhi school and the first of the twin luminaries that heralded the advent of the faith of the Bab, prophesied that at the appearance of the promised one, all things would be reversed. The last would be first, the first last. Baha'u'llah in one of his tablets refers to the symbol and illusion of the mystery of the great reversal in the sign of the sovereign. He states, through his reversal he hath caused the exalted to be abased and the abased to be exalted. And he recalls that in the days of Jesus, it was those who were distinguished for their learning, the men of letters and religion, who denied him, whilst humble fishermen made haste to gain admittance into the kingdom. See also note 172 for additional information about Sheikh Ahmad Asai See the Dawnbreakers, chapters 1 and 10.
Okay, the next thing you'll read is paragraph 166. But to comment on the great reversal, we know of an excellent case, and that is when the Bab and Qaddus went to Isfahan to make the announcement of the Bab being the promised one, the promised Gayam. And all of the important people there turned away from him, did not recognize his station. The one who became the first believer in Isfahan was a mere sifter of wheat. That's how Ali Nachavani mentioned it in one of his talks. He was a sifter of wheat. That's what he was. But he was the one who recognized the Bab and was the first to embrace the cause. And we're going to read a little bit more about him in some of these other references from the Aqdas. The person that the Bab specifically gave the message to was Muhammad Hassan. We're also going to hear about Muhammad Hassan. This is the great reversal. The leader of such esteem in such a holy city became the bottom, the last. Just the sifter of wheat became the top, the first. So that's what we're going to read. We're going to read paragraph 166 and then note 179.
Call ye to mind the sheikh whose name was Muhammad Hassan, who ranked among the most learned divines of his day. When the true one was made manifest, this sheikh, along with others of his calling, rejected him, while a sifter of wheat and barley accepted him and turned unto the Lord. Though he was occupied both night and day in setting down what he conceived to be the laws and ordinances of God, yet when he who is the unconstrained appeared, not one letter thereof availed him, or he would not have turned away from a countenance that hath illumined the faces of the well-favored of the Lord. Had ye believed in God when he revealed himself, the people would not have turned aside from him, nor would the things ye witness today have befallen us. Fear God and be not of the heedless.
So let's now read note 179, which tells us a little bit more about the sifter of wheat.
A sifter of wheat and barley. This is an allusion to Mullah Muhammad Jafar Gandum Pakun, the first person in Isfahan to accept the faith of the Bab. He is mentioned in the Persian Bayan and praised as one who donned the robe of discipleship. In the Dawnbreakers, Nabil describes the unreserved acceptance of the message by the sifter of wheat and his zealous advocacy of the new revelation. He joined the company of the defenders of the fort of Sheikh Tarbasi and perished during that siege.
Can you imagine? He's mentioned in the Bab's Bayan and in Baha'u'llah's Kitab-i-Aqdas. You see the great reversal. I'm wearing a little blue sapphire ring that is a gift to one of the Baha'is who was still at the World Center when a relative of the sifter of wheat came to work for the World Center. As a matter of fact, I sold her the car I owned for 2 months. Her name was Rizvania Gandum Pakun. And the person she gave the ring to gave the ring to me. So I have something from a generation after the sifter of wheat. So now we're going to back up and we're going to read K paragraph 159.
It hath been forbidden. It hath been forbidden you to carry arms unless essential, and permitted you to attire yourselves in silk. The Lord hath relieved you as a bounty on his part of the restrictions that formerly applied to clothing and to the trim of the beard. He verily is the ordainer, the omniscient. Let there be naught in your demeanor of which sound and upright minds would disapprove, and make not yourselves the playthings of the ignorant. Well is it with him who hath adorned himself with the vesture of seemly conduct and a praiseworthy character. He is assuredly reckoned with those who aid their Lord through distinctive and outstanding deeds.
Okay, while I'm talking, would you look up note 173, Patsy?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it interesting that that first sentence has two subjects that seem to not have anything to do with each other? You are forbidden to carry arms, but you can wear silk now. Interesting that Baha'u'llah would put those two together. But actually, there are three laws in this paragraph. They have to do with weapons, clothing, and personal appearance. It has three notes for clarification. The first is the longest as it pertains to the carrying of arms. So Patsy will read note 173. And then the other two when I ask her.
It hath been forbidden you to carry arms unless essential. Baha'u'llah confirms an injunction contained in the Bayan, which makes it unlawful to carry arms, unless it is necessary to do so, with regard to circumstances under which the bearing of arms might be essential for an individual. Abdu'l-Baha gives permission to a believer for self-protection in a dangerous environment. Shoghi Effendi, in a letter written on his behalf, has also indicated that in an emergency, when there is no legal force at hand to appeal to, a Baha'i is justified in defending his life. There are a number of other situations in which weapons are needed and can be legitimately used. For instance, in countries where people hunt for their food and clothing, and in such sports as archery, marksmanship, and fencing. On the societal level, the principle of collective security enunciated by Baha'u'llah. See Gleanings from the Writings of Baha'u'llah, CX, I don't know what that is, V11. And elaborated by Shoghi Effendi, see the Guardian's letters in the World Order of Baha'u'llah, does not presuppose the abolition of the use of force, but prescribes a system in which force is made the servant of justice, and which provides for the existence of an international peacekeeping force that will safeguard the organic unity of the whole Commonwealth. In the tablet of Bisharat, Baha'u'llah expresses the hope that weapons of war throughout the world may be converted into instruments of reconstruction, and that strife and conflict may be removed from the midst of men. In another tablet, Baha'u'llah stresses the importance of fellowship with the followers of all religions. He also states that all of holy war have been blotted out from the book.
Of course, the Universal House of Justice has regularly been asked about this, not carrying weapons. And weapons seems to be more than just guns in the Kitab-i-Aqdas. We tend to think of weapons as bullet kinds of weapons rather than other instruments. So the House of Justice said that we don't have to sit back and just wait to be injured or killed. We have the right to defend ourselves. Now, on a spiritual level, you know that Baha'u'llah says it is better to be killed than to kill. But all of these are conditional on the circumstances. For example, the nations of the world are supposed to bring in the lesser peace. But it says, what is it? Once unity has been established, if a government arises to cause disunity, then all the nations of the world must arise to put that nation down. So there are provisions in the United Nations, for example, for a peacekeeping force. Now we'll talk about silk and read note 174. And then we'll automatically read 175, Patsy.
O people of the world, when the mystic dove will have winged its flight from its sanctuary of praise.
Is
And
that
so-
one?
Sorry, Patsy. Patsy, read note 174
Oh, I'm sorry.
and note 175. Thank you.
I went to paragraph 4, sorry. And permitted, okay, note 174, and permitted you to attire yourselves in silk. According to Islamic practice, the wearing of silk by men was generally forbidden, except in times of holy war. This prohibition, which was not based on the verses of the Quran, was abrogated by the Bab. Do I continue 175?
Yes, please.
The Lord hath relieved you of the restrictions that formerly applied to clothing and to the trim of the beard. Many rules about dress had their origins in the laws and traditional practices of the world's religions. For example, the Shiite clergy adopted for themselves a distinctive headdress and robes, and at one time forbade the people to adopt European attire. Muslim practice, in its desire to emulate the custom of the Prophet, also introduced a number of restrictions with regard to the trim of the mustache and the length of the beard. Baha'u'llah removed such limitations on one's apparel and beard. He leaves such matters to the discretion of the individual, and at the same time calls upon the believers not to transgress the bounds of propriety and to exercise moderation in all that pertains to dress.
And as we read in the paragraph from the Aqdas itself, that we should not be the playthings of the ignorant. My understanding, when the ignorant is written in the Revelation, it's those who have strayed far from God, who don't know the teachings of God, not just the Baha'i teachings, but kind of the unbelievers of the world who operate by their own standards. We're not going to read paragraphs 161, 62, and 163. We're going to jump to paragraph 167, Patsy. The ones that we're skipping, they cover mankind's being told to develop cities of God. I can't help but think that has to do with the Baha'is taking the messages of the revelation to the cities and turning them into the cities of God. They also talk about the blessedness of recognizing belief in God, not questioning God's doing, and other points for personal consideration. Shoghi Effendi took those 3 pages that I just mentioned, 3 paragraphs, 161, 162, and 163, and he published them together in Gleanings from the Writings of Baha'u'llah, pages 86 and 87. So you can read them in both places. And of course, we said at the very beginning in session 1 that Shoghi Effendi scattered the Kitab-i-Aqdas throughout his translations of the prayers and meditations, World Order of Baha'u'llah, God Passes By, and certainly Gleanings from the Writings of Baha'u'llah. I think it's important that we read paragraph 167 and its related notes. Patsy, that'll be notes 181 and 182, I guess. Yeah.
Okay.
But because the subject of Muhammad being the last prophet, because of his title of the seal of the prophets, and using that to reject Baha'u'llah as a false prophet is a really strong barrier in the Islamic world. Christianity has similar veils of beliefs with Christ's title as the Son of God. Now we're going to talk about Muhammad's title as the seal of God. Paragraph 167.
Beware lest any name debar you from him who is the possessor of all names, or any word shut you out from this remembrance of God, this source of wisdom amongst you. Turn unto God and seek his protection, O concourse of divines, and make not of yourselves a veil between me and my creatures. Thus doth your Lord admonish you and command you to be just, lest your works should come to naught and ye yourselves be oblivious of your plight. Shall he who denieth this cause be able to vindicate the truth of any cause throughout creation? Nay, by him who is the fashioner of the universe. Yet the people are wrapped in a palpable veil. Say, through this cause, the day star of testimony hath dawned, and the luminary of proof hath shed its radiance upon all that dwell on earth. Fear God, O men of insight, and be not of those who disbelieve in me. Take heed lest the word prophet withhold you from this most great announcement, or any reference to the sorry, how do you pronounce that? Vigentracy. Debar you from the sovereignty of him who is the vicegerent of God, which overshadoweth all the worlds. Every name hath been created by his word, and every cause is dependent on his irresistible, his mighty and wondrous cause. Say, this is the day of God, the day on which naught shall be mentioned save his own self, the omnipotent protector of all worlds. This is the cause that hath made all your superstitions and idols to tremble. In note 181.
Yes, I wanted to say, however, some of the Christian blinders from previous holy books are mentioned regularly by Baha'u'llah. As I said, I'm rereading Gems of Divine Knowledge, where Baha'u'llah talks about the Christians repeating Christ saying, heaven and earth may pass away, but my words will never pass away. And that they believe that the Christ who will return in the clouds will just repeat what laws and ordinances he brought in the Bible. It'll be nothing new. Then Baha'u'llah says in Gems of Divine Knowledge that the same is done with Islam, that they will say if the promised Qayyam fulfills absolutely every prophetic expectation, if he changes one little paragraph, one word of the laws in the Quran, they would not accept him. So these misinterpretations are veils between the manifestations of God in every dispensation. So now we'll read the notes. 181.
Any reference to vicegerency debar you from the sovereignty of him who is the vicegerent of God.
Vicegerent, which
Vicegerent.
means a simple explanation of vicegerent is a deputy of a sovereign. In this case, Baha'u'llah is the deputy and God is the sovereign.
The word here translated vicegerency is in the original Arabic vilayat, which has a range of meanings, including vicegerency, guardianship, protectorship, and successorship. It is used in relation to God himself, to his manifestation, or to those who are appointed successors of a manifestation. In this verse of the Aqdas, Baha'u'llah warns against allowing such concepts to blind one to the sovereignty of the new divine manifestation, the true vicegerent of God.
Well, Baha'u'llah is telling the religious leaders not to cause strife in the land and to inform people of his coming. And then he talks about people who didn't. I'm trying to read my notes and seem natural at the same time. I'm not doing a very good job of it. Okay. I put down here, I'll just read what I wrote, okay? Paragraph 169 is telling the divines, religious leaders, not to cause strife in the land and to inform the people of his coming. Then Baha'u'llah writes in the next paragraph of one who didn't. We will look at a bit of history after the passing of Sayyid Qasim. Mullah Hussein learned that those in the Shaykhi school were now to go in search of the promised one, which he did, Mullah Hussein did, and he met the Bab, and that was the occasion of the declaration of the Bab. As most of us know, 17 others followed Mullah Hussein's example and became the 18 letters of the living. Thus, technically, the Shaykhi community had fulfilled its purpose. Now let's read paragraph 170 to see what happened next.
Call ye to mind, Karim, and how, when we summon him unto God, he waxed disdainful, prompted by his own desires. Yet we had sent him that which was a solace to the eye of proof in the world of being and the fulfillment of God's testimony to all the denizens of earth and heaven, as a token of the grace of him who is the all-possessing, the Most High. We bade him embrace the truth, but he turned away until, as an act of justice from God, angels of wrath laid hold upon him. Unto this we truly were a witness.
Note 182, Patsy, is going to refer to explaining, call ye to mind Karim. So we're going to learn about this man who then took over the Shaky school that, as I just said, had already completed its mission, which was to search out the promised Gayam, which Mullah Hussein and the 17 others, plus more of the students of the Shaky school. But what happened to the Shaky school? Note 182.
Haji Mirza Muhammad Karim Khan-e-Kermani, 1810, circa 1873, was the self-appointed leader of the Shaky community after the death of Sayyid Kazim, who was the appointed successor to Sheikh Ahmad Asai. See notes 171 and 172. He dedicated himself to the promotion of the teachings of Sheikh Ahmad. The opinions he expressed became the subject of controversy among his supporters and opponents alike. Regarded as one of the leading savants and prolific authors of his age, he composed numerous books and epistles in the various fields of learning that were cultivated in those times. He actively opposed both the Bab and Baha'u'llah and used his treatises to attack the Bab and his teachings. In the Kitab-i-Aqdas, Baha'u'llah condemns the tone and content of his writings and singles out for criticism one of his works, which contains negative allusions to the Bab. Shoghi Effendi describes him as inordinately ambitious and hypocritical, and describes how he, at the special request of the Shah, had in a treatise viciously attacked the new faith and its doctrines.
The reference of Baha'u'llah's talking about him in the Kitab-i-Aqdas, you can find that on pages 184 to 186. There is much interest in the history of the disbelievers. This particular disbeliever, who you notice passed away just about the same time that Baha'u'llah was writing the Kitab-i-Aqdas that we are studying. Now we're going to continue to learn more history of the learned who did recognize and serve. So we're moving on to paragraph 173 of the Aqdas and 183 of the notes.
Happy are ye, O ye, the learned ones in Baha. By the Lord, ye are the billows of the most mighty ocean, the stars of the firmament of glory, the standards of triumph, waving betwixt earth and heaven. Ye are the manifestations of steadfastness amidst men, and the day springs of divine utterance to all that dwell on earth. Well is it with him that turneth unto you, and woe betide the froward. This day it behoveth whoso hath quaffed the mystic wine of everlasting life from the hands of the loving kindness of the Lord his God, the merciful, to pulsate even as the throbbing artery in the body of mankind, that through him may be quickened the world and every crumbling bone.
You know, note 183 is kind of long, and I think Patsy needs a rest from reading. So Patsy, look up paragraph 175, but in the meanwhile, I'll just summarize note 183 because it's all about, O ye the learned ones of Baha. It probably is filled with everything that most of you know, that the learned among the people of Baha and the rulers are explained very succinctly by Shoghi Effendi and the Universal House of Justice. The learned, on the one hand, are, we might say, the appointed servants of the cause. The hands of the cause of God are known as the learned. When Shoghi Effendi died, they became the ones that the Baha'is of the world would turn to keep the faith afloat in the ocean and river of Baha'u'llah's revelation. The rulers are the institutions of the cause of Baha'u'llah, specifically the House of Justice, the National Assemblies, and the local assemblies. The last two will be known as National and Local Houses of Justice, or words to those effect. The paragraph tells us the history of the House of Justice finding out that the duties of the hands of the cause of God must extend it to the future, but they did not have the authority to appoint other hands of the cause of God. So when they said it was the duties that needed to extend into the future, they institutionalized the Continental Boards of Consulars. So they became the learned, and their auxiliary board members are the learned. So the rulers within the faith are the institutions, and the learned are those that I call the appointed branch of the faith. If you haven't read it already, I really recommend the Ministry of the Custodians, 1957 to 1963, an account of the stewardship of the hands of the cause of God. Now, there is no author listed in this book, Custodians, the Ministry of the Custodians. But both Ali Nachavani, in his Shoghi Effendi, The Range and Power of His Pen, and Violette Nachavani in her tribute to Amatu Baha Rahia Khanum, both of them state that the material was compiled by Rahia Khanum. If you have the book, you will notice it has a 22-page introduction by Amatu Baha Rahia Khanum, followed by 408 pages of the compilation of the history of those 6 years. It really is very moving to read, and I recommend it. Paragraph 174 is the one that Baha'u'llah appoints Abdu Baha, the center of the cause, and whom all the Baha'is should turn to. Now we're going to read, Patsy, paragraph 175.
O pen of the Most High, move thou upon the tablet at the bidding of thy Lord, the creator of the heavens, and tell of the time when he, who is the dayspring of divine unity, purposed to direct his steps towards the school of transcendent oneness. Haply the pure in heart may gain thereby a glimpse, be it as small as a needle's eye, of the mysteries of thy Lord, the Almighty, the Omniscient, that lie concealed behind the veils. Say, we indeed set foot within the school of inner meaning and explanation when all created things were unaware. We saw the words sent down by him who is the all-merciful, and we accepted the verses of God, the help in peril, the self-subsisting, which he presented unto us, and hearkened unto that which he had solemnly affirmed in the tablet. This we assuredly did behold, and we assented to his wish through our behest, for truly we are potent to command.
These notes are going to cover the School of Transcendent Oneness, which is also the School of Inner Meaning and Explanation. So we're going to read note 185. You know, we should have given Patsy 2 books of the Aqdas, one that she could open it up to the paragraph and one that she could open it up to the notes, because it isn't easy going from one to the other. So when you get to it, read note 185, Patsy.
The school of transcendent oneness. In this verse and the ones which immediately follow it, Baha'u'llah confronts one of the reasons some of the Babis rejected his claim to be the promised one of the Bayan. Their rejection was based on a tablet addressed by the Bab to him who will be made manifest, on the reversed side of which the Bab had written, "May the glances of him whom God shall make manifest illumine this letter at the primary school." This tablet is published in selections from the writings of the Bab. These Babis maintain that since Baha'u'llah was 2 years older than the Bab, it was not possible for him to receive this tablet at the primary school. Baha'u'llah here explains that the reference is to events transpiring in the spiritual worlds beyond this plane of existence.
Friends, I have another recommendation for you, and that is to study the footnote for the second tablet from the Bab to Baha'u'llah, mentioned in this paragraph 185 in selections from the writings of the Bab. It's on pages 6 and 7. It also explains that footnote that the Babis believed the primary school was a physical one for children. Parts of the Aqdas are also in that footnote, plus verification in the paragraph 175. Baha'u'llah says, "We accepted the verses of God." That's also mentioned in that paragraph, that footnote on pages 6 and 7. Nada will probably have a CD that I produced. Well, I didn't produce the CD, I just did the words of it, called Ties Between the Bab and Baha'u'llah. Now, CDs are passé now. Nobody's got them in their CD players, don't seem to be in cars anymore. But I have a file copy of Ties Between the Bab and Baha'u'llah, in which I talk about that footnote and the language of the next world. So if anybody wants that file to read or to print out and study, you could ask Nada and I'll send her the file, or you could ask me and I'll send you the file. This would be a Word file. So now back to the Aqdas. Paragraph 177 includes warnings in respect of God and his call and the language of the kingdom. Baha'u'llah writes again of the school of God, and also the phrase, the letters B and E, as it appears regularly in the revelation of Baha'u'llah. We should look at this and its notes. Patsy, this would be paragraph 177 and note 188.
Take heed that ye dispute not idly concerning the Almighty and his cause, for lo, he hath appeared amongst you, invested with a revelation so great as to encompass all things, whether of the past or of the future. Were we to address our theme by speaking in the language of the inmates of the kingdom, we would say, in truth, God created that school ere he created heaven and earth, and we entered it before the letters B and E were joined and knit together. Such is the language of our servants in our kingdom. Consider what the tongue of the dwellers of our exalted dominion would utter. For we have taught them our knowledge and have revealed to them whatever had lain hidden in God's wisdom. Imagine then what the tongue of might and grandeur would utter in his all-glorious abode.
The language of the inmates of the kingdom. I tried to understand that in one of our other sessions. Millenniums of time with souls passing and going on to the next world. The languages that have been invented are spoken over all those billions of years. I have no clue when the human voice was able to speak, but just think of the languages we have right at this moment on the planet. And when we all die, we're all going to take that language with us. I don't know, because there's a language that must unite the souls of the world. Isn't that exciting? So, just learn the universal language if you're going to live that long. And maybe that'll be the language in the next world. Who knows? If I go first, I'll come back and tell you. Okay, but to understand B and E, let's read note 188.
The letters B and E were joined and knit together. Shoghi Effendi, in letters written on his behalf, has explained the significance of the letters B and E. They constitute the word B, which he states means the creative power of God, who through his command causes all things to come into being, and the power of the manifestation of God, his great spiritual creative force. The imperative be in the original Arabic is the word consisting of the two letters kaf and nun. They have been translated by Shoghi Effendi in the above manner. This word has been used in the Quran as God's bidding, calling creation into being.
If we had Saidi Bashuri here, you would get a very wonderful dissertation on that. The only thing I understand is B and E brought everything into creation. Paragraph 178, I look at as speaking to the believers of today and the believers of the future. Through our history of the heroic age and the beginning of the formative age, entailed crises and victories. We study them, especially now with the letters from the House of Justice. But those sufferings are still with us. And I think in 178, Baha'u'llah is saying that to those of us now. This is not a cause which may be made a plaything for your idle fancies, nor is it a field for the foolish and faint of heart. Then Baha'u'llah brings up in the Kitab-i-Aqdas the fulfillment of a prophecy that he completed. It's a prophecy in the book of Isaiah, and the government shall be upon his shoulders. So now we're going to go into the Aqdas and the world order of Baha'u'llah. Patsy, paragraph 181.
The world's equilibrium have been upset through the vibrating influence of this new world order. Mankind's ordered life hath been revolutionized through the agency of this wondrous system. the like of which mortal eyes have never witnessed.
Naturally, we're going to have to read note 189 because this is part of the mission of Baha'u'llah to unite the world, his world order.
This new world order, in the Persian Bayan, the Bab stated, well is it with him who fixeth his gaze upon the order of Baha'u'llah and rendereth thanks unto his Lord, for he will assuredly be made manifest. God hath indeed irrevocably ordained it in the Bayan. Shoghi Effendi identifies this order with the system Baha'u'llah envisages in the Aqdas, in which he testifies to its revolutionizing effect on the life of humanity and reveals the laws and principles which govern its operation. The features of the New World Order are delineated in the writings of Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha, and in the letters of Shoghi Effendi and the Universal House of Justice. The institutions of the present-day Baha'i administrative order, which constitute the structural basis of Baha'u'llah's world order, will mature and evolve into the Baha'i World Commonwealth. In this regard, Shoghi Effendi affirms that the administrative order will, as its component parts, its organic institutions, begin to function with efficiency and vigor, assert its claim and demonstrate its capacity to be regarded not only as the nucleus, but the very pattern of the New World Order destined to embrace in the fullness of time the whole of mankind. For additional information on the evolution of this New World Order, see, for example, the letters of Shoghi Effendi published in the World Order of Baha'u'llah.
That book is a series of letters. One of the most important parts is the dispensation of Baha'u'llah. There's another CD paper I can offer you that gives a progression to the most great peace and the Baha'i Commonwealth as I was able to study it. The CD in the paper is called Glimpses of the Future. Nada has the CD, but again, I can send the Word file if anybody would like also to read that. Paragraphs 182 and 183 enjoins the study of the revelation to discover its secrets. Don't vacillate in embracing the cause of God. This is the balance by which all on earth are weighed. It affects all of humanity. Don't make it a cause for dissension. That's the gist of those two paragraphs. Are they laws? Well, we might well accept them as laws in respect to our relationship as individuals with Baha'u'llah and his revelation. Study to learn the secrets. Don't vacillate. It affects all of humanity collectively and individually. We're going to read paragraph 184, which is a longer one. That's why we're not reading the other two. So 184, Patsy.
Say, O source of perversion, abandon thy willful blindness.
May I interrupt? I might as well tell you now that Baha'u'llah is speaking about Mirza Yahya. So listen carefully.
Abandon thy willful blindness and speak forth the truth amidst the people. I swear by God that I have wept for thee to see thee following thy selfish passions and renouncing him who fashioned thee and brought thee into being. Call to mind the tender mercy of thy Lord, and remember how he nurtured thee by day and by night for service to the cause. Fear God, and be thou of the truly repentant. Granted that the people were confused about thy station, is it conceivable that thou thyself art similarly confused? Tremble before thy Lord and recall the days when thou didst stand before our throne and didst write down the verses that we dictated unto thee, verses sent down by God, the omnipotent protector, the Lord of might and power. Beware lest the fire of thy presumptuousness debar thee from attaining to God's holy court. Turn unto him, and fear not because of thy deeds. He in truth forgiveth whomsoever he desireth, as a bounty on his part. No God is there but him, the ever forgiving, the all bounteous. We admonish thee solely for the sake of God. Should thou accept this counsel, thou wilt have acted to thine own behoof. And should thou reject it, thy Lord verily can well dispense with thee and with all those who, in manifest delusion, have followed thee. Behold, God hath laid hold on him who led thee astray. Return unto God, humble, submissive, and lowly. Verily he will put away from thee thy sins, for thy Lord of a certainty is the forgiving, the mighty, the all-merciful.
In spite of all the abominable acts that Mirza Yahya did, including attempted murder on his beloved half-brother, Baha'u'llah assured him of God's forgiveness, but he persisted in his hatred to his very death. He lived long enough, 1912, to witness the spread of the faith to the West and the greatness of Abdu'l-Baha's reputation even being knighted by the British government. Let's read note 190, which brings up Sayyid Muhammad, the Antichrist of the Baha'i revelation.
O source of perversion. This is a reference to Mirza Yahya, known as Sub-e-Azal, Morning of Eternity, a younger half-brother of Baha'u'llah, who arose against him and opposed his cause. Mirza Yahya was nominated by the Bab to serve as a figurehead for the Babi community, pending the imminent manifestation of the Promised One. At the instigation of Sayyid Muhammad Isfahani, see note 192, Mirza Yahya betrayed the trust of the Bab, claimed to be his successor, and intrigued against Baha'u'llah, even attempting to have him murdered. When Baha'u'llah formally declared his mission to him in Adrianople, Mirza Yahya responded by going to the length of putting forward his own claim to be the recipient of an independent revelation. His pretensions were eventually rejected by all but a few, who became known as Azilis. See note 177. He is described by Shoghi Effendi as the archbreaker of the covenant of the Bab. See God Passes By, chapter 10.
Note 192 explains that Baha'u'llah was 13 years older than Mirza Yahya, and that's what it meant when he needed to give him counsel and take care of this half-brother. Looking at note 192, we learn a bit more about Sayyid Muhammad. Patsy, 192.
God hath laid hold on him who led thee astray. A reference to Sayyid Muhammad-Isfahani, who is described by Shoghi Effendi as the Antichrist of the Baha'i revelation. He was a man of corrupt character and great personal ambition who induced Mirza Yahya to oppose Baha'u'llah and to claim prophethood for himself. See note 190. Although he was an adherent of Mirza Yahya, Sayyid Muhammad was exiled with Baha'u'llah to Akka. He continued to agitate and plot against Baha'u'llah. In describing the circumstances of his death, Shoghi Effendi has written in God Passes By, a fresh danger now clearly threatened the life of Baha'u'llah. Though he himself had stringently forbidden his followers on several occasions, both verbally and in writing, any retaliatory acts against their tormentors, and had even sent back to Beirut an irresponsible Arab convert who had meditated avenging the wrongs suffered by his beloved leader. 7 of the companions clandestinely sought out and slew 3 of their persecutors. Among them were Sayyid Muhammad and Akajan. The consternation that seized an already oppressed community was indescribable. Baha'u'llah's indignation knew no bounds. Were we, he thus voices his emotions in a tablet revealed shortly after this act had been committed, to make mention of what befell us. The heavens would be rent asunder and the mountains would crumble. My captivity, he wrote on another occasion, cannot harm me. That which can harm me is the conduct of those who love me, who claim to be related to me, and yet perpetrate what causes my heart and my pen to groan.
There are all kinds of books in our Baha'i literature that covers the history of these 2 arch enemies of Baha'u'llah. The next paragraph, 187, is very simple. Baha'u'llah is telling us to be kind to animals, burden not an animal more than it can bear. Murder was covered in other paragraphs of the Kitab-i-Aqdas, but paragraph 188 talks about manslaughter. So when you read 188, should anyone unintentionally take another's life, it is incumbent upon him to render to the family of the deceased an indemnity of 100 mithqals of gold. So if you wanted to find out about this particular law, it's not listed in the index under murder. It's listed under manslaughter. Now we're going to read the penultimate paragraph of the Aqdas. We're going to read paragraph 189, because this has to do with the unity of mankind also.
O members of parliaments throughout the world, select ye a single language for the use of all on earth, and adopt ye likewise a common script. God verily maketh plain for you that which shall profit you and enable you to be independent of others. He of a truth is the most bountiful, the all-knowing, the all-informed. This will be the cause of unity, could ye but comprehend it, and the greatest instrument for promoting harmony and civilization. Would that ye might understand. We have appointed 2 signs for the coming of age of the human race. The first, which is the most firm foundation, we have set down in other of our tablets. while the second hath been revealed in this wondrous book. Do I finish?
No, thank you. Okay. Let's read note 184, but I will digest 190. You're going to read 194. I'm going to explain 193. I can chew gum and walk at the same time, honest. Baha'u'llah enjoins the adoption of the universal language, and he says it's 2 stages. The first stage is when the nations of the world will consult and come up with either an existing language or one to be invented that will be taught in all the schools. And then the second stage would be in the distant future, when there will only be one language. There was a time in Haifa when I was reading what I thought were confusing statements of Baha'u'llah, and I took it to Ian Simple and I showed him the 2 pages from the writings. I said, "What does this mean, Ian?" This paper says, Baha'u'llah says, that the nations of the world will select or invent the language. This paper says the House of Justice will do it. What does this mean? Ian had such patience with me. He said, it depends. If the nations of the world realize at the time the language is needed, they will invent it, select it, and the House of Justice will ratify it. If it is needed and they have not reached the stage of doing that, then it will be done by the Universal House of Justice. Now, in retrospect, since studying this Aqdas paragraph, I'm wondering if it's both anyway. You notice my crystal ball is a little foggy, so I'm not certain of this. But what if the nations of the world select the language that will be taught to everybody? And that's the first stage. What if the second stage, which is the language that will be the only language spoken, is selected or ratified by the House of Justice? Interesting. Okay. Read note 194. These are the 2 signs for the coming of age.
We have appointed 2 signs for the coming of age of the human race. The first sign of the coming of age of humanity, referred to in the writings of Baha'u'llah, is the emergence of a science which is described as that divine philosophy, which will include the discovery of a radical approach to the transmutation of elements. This is an indication of the splendors of the future stupendous expansion of knowledge. Concerning the second sign, which Baha'u'llah indicates to have been revealed in the Kitab-i-Aqdas, Shoghi Effendi states that Baha'u'llah, in his most holy book, has enjoined the selection of a single language and the adoption of a common script for all on earth to use, an injunction which, when carried out, would, as he himself affirms in that book, be one of the signs of the coming of age of the human race. Further insight into this process of mankind's coming of age and proceeding to maturity is provided by the following statement of Baha'u'llah. One of the signs of the maturity of the world is that no one will accept to bear the weight of kingship. Kingship will remain with none willing to bear alone its weight. That day will be the day wherein wisdom will be manifested among mankind. The coming of age of the human race has been associated by Shoghi Effendi with the unification of the whole of mankind, the establishment of a world commonwealth, and an unprecedented stimulus to the intellectual, the moral, and spiritual life of the entire human race.
Well, there are three subjects in that note that's important. One is that kingships will return. We talked about this in a previous session. But the sign of maturity is that no one will want to be a king unless it was to help mankind. Then there's the two signs for the coming of age of the human race, which was what we just discussed, the universal language. And you may remember the Universal House of Justice announced that it appears that English is the temporary universal language. The third is the transmutation of elements. You know, Baha'u'llah was asked that famous tablet, can you turn copper into gold? And he gives an answer that, of course, you can turn copper into gold. But he also said that, I lost my thought. Oh, the fact that you can turn copper into gold, Baha'u'llah says, means that you can turn any element into another element. I have a book called Q is for Quantum. It's kind of a dictionary, an encyclopedia of scientific phrases and scientists and history. And it's like a dictionary in that it's an alphabetical order. So if you go to the T's, you actually find transmutation of elements. Here's what it says, because there's not very much. The alchemist's dream of converting one element into another is now carried out routinely by nuclear physicists. For example, plutonium can be made by bombarding uranium with neutrons. So here's Baha'u'llah, uneducated, who says, I've never been to any school, speaking like a scientist. Of course, he has all knowledge. It's not surprising to us, but certainly I recommend scientists studying the revelation of Baha'u'llah. Friends, the only thing I have left, because the last paragraph is Baha'u'llah repeating the forbidding of opium. I have some closing notes. I hope you let me just read them. I'm interested in hearing what surprised or astounded you during these 10 sessions looking at the Kitab-i-Aqdas. For me, it was the amount of history that appeared and the non-law paragraphs. The last paragraph of the preface states, the significance and character of the Kitab-i-Aqdas and the range of its subjects it contains have been graphically depicted by Shoghi Effendi and God Passes By. Those thoughts had me recalling again Baha'u'llah's Gems of Divine Mysteries, one of the many astounding tablets of the Baghdad period, the 10 years Baha'u'llah was in Baghdad. In the introduction, the World Center wrote that Baha'u'llah had these opening notes before the tablet itself. These are Baha'u'llah's words. before he began writing the tablet, Gems of Divine Mysteries. This thesis was written in reply to a seeker who had asked how the promised Mahdi could have become transformed into Ali Muhammad the Bab. The opportunity provided by this question was seized to elaborate on a number of subjects, all of which are of use and benefit both to them that seek and to those who have attained. Could ye perceive with the eye of divine virtue? That introduction goes on to use almost an entire page that Baha'u'llah addressed, an entire page of subjects that Baha'u'llah addressed in Gems of Divine Mysteries. In other words, Baha'u'llah got one question: how was the Bab transformed into the Mahdi? You know, if you read the 75-page tablet, you would be hard-pressed to figure out the reason, because Baha'u'llah has given a whole page of subjects that he used that question to talk about. I think we should look at the Kitab-i-Aqdas in that same way, that it's not a mere book of laws. It's a book of history. It's a book of explaining what he had to go through to bring this book of laws to us. There's the injunctions of the heart rather than the body and physical obedience to laws. You know, don't have more than one wife at a time. Have parental consent for marriage. Don't drink opium. But there's this: read the writings, discover the secrets, don't hesitate, don't vacillate. Because every part of Baha'u'llah's revelation is really calling the hearts of the righteous towards his holy threshold. Those are my thoughts after 10 weeks of sharing this book of laws with you. I'd like to hear what others got out of this study. What
Friends,
surprised you?
yeah, please use your raise your hand feature and unmute yourself, okay? And thank you so much, Marianne.
Kathy?
Yeah, Kathy, unmute yourself, please.
Yes, I thought I did. For so long, after the Kitab-i-Aqdas came out, I was a little nervous about reading it, thinking that I'll never live up to this. I was terribly afraid, and I read bits and pieces, but taking this class has eased my anxiety and made me realize that this is actually a path to God. If we follow these as much as we can as a human, as a humble human, then we'll be closer to God. And that's our whole goal, is to have that connection and love for our Creator through the manifestations, and especially through this dispensation. It just broadens my picture, and I just love it. And I loved having you teach it, Marianne. It's been a blessing.
Yes, your comments reminds me where Baha'u'llah himself said, I bring not a mere code of laws, I bring the choice wine.
Helen, please unmute yourself.
I just have a question that I'm always perplexed about the phrase fear of God. What can you give a description of what that means? I keep thinking like, okay, we've got to be scared with disobeying him and et cetera, et cetera.
Well, there are other people probably could explain it better. I've questioned it myself, Helen. It's like fearing the wrath of your father. I know when my father looked at me, I knew he was unhappy, and I feared that he would not love me and not like me. And so I tried to be more obedient to my father. This is what comes into my mind right now. He's the all-loving, and maybe we should fear his displeasure when we do something wrong, and that's a protection, and that's a help. That's the only simple way that I accept the fear of God, because he's all loving. So I fear I'll displease him. But there are probably 70 other meanings to that. Does that help you, Helen?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Lena, please unmute yourself.
Okay, before I make my, okay. Before I'd like to add to what you said, Marianne, about the fear of God. In my mind, I'm very simplistic. To me, the fear of God is like a traffic light. When you see the red light, that tells you not to do something. Because if you do something, you're going to be in big trouble, whether you are crossing the street or driving. And that God is the red light. So the fear of God has to do a lot with loving us and protection. As you were mentioning a minute ago, Marianne, it is protection. It is definitely a protection. It is not a punishment. The fear of God is not fear and damnation. It's on the contrary, it's love and protection. That is how I deal with it.
Well put.
The comment I wanted to make is, I thank you so much for this class, because you took something that is very, very, very dense, and we can spend a lifetime studying it, and you managed to make it an introduction, a sort of a palatable, not, as mentioned earlier, not fearsome thing to tackle. It is tackleable, if that is a word. It is tackleable, but in little doses, slowly but gently, and then bringing other stuff to it. So I thank you very much for doing this class. I'm really appreciative. Thank you.
And we thank Nada also.
Yes, of course, of course.
Please, Jamie, unmute yourself.
You know, I've heard other people say that's something they didn't like, the fear of God in the writings. But you know, when you look at and learn of some of the horrible things people do, and I wonder, don't they believe in God? Don't they fear God? And if I think, you know, Baha'u'llah knows that at this stage in our development, we need to fear God in order to not do some of the horrible things that people would do. Whether you think fearing God is, you know, oh, well, I just want to love God. Doesn't he want me to love him? No, he knows what we need right now. And that is the fear of God. Because look at some of the terrible things some people do, and you wonder, how could they?
Yep. And we were created to love each other.
Dennis, please unmute yourself. Yeah, unmute yourself, please, Dennis. Sorry.
There it goes. Well, I think of the fear of God, and I agree that it's a fear of disappointing God. And nothing would make me feel sadder as a child than to know that I disappointed my mother or my dad. I just didn't want to do it. And that helped me as I grew up through my adolescence and teen years very much. Then you become a Baha'i. And I recall, I don't know who the author of this was. I don't think it's necessarily a Baha'i author, but one of my favorite phrases even is that it goes like, upon the plains of hesitation, bleach the bones of countless thousands who, upon the threshold of success, sat down to wait and wasted and died. So we find ourselves on that threshold, and the importance then continuing to remind myself to gain experience, to broaden my knowledge, broaden my understanding. You know, some people may have 10 years experience in something, while other people have 1 year's experience 10 times. And we don't want to get in that repetitious where we just have those limits that we don't surpass. That's why I value you, Marianne, and you, Netta, for the efforts that you put together. I know that you get paid high wages for this, and that's really makes it worth it. But nonetheless, we love you, we appreciate you, and look forward to our future friendship.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you.
Well put.
Catherine, please.
Yes, I just wanted to thank you so much, Marianne, for your time. And I would say that one of the great things about this class has been all of your personal stories about your encounters with the House of Justice, with Marie Khadem. I think you really personalized these people for us and gave us the opportunity, sort of an insight into them. And also some of the questions that you had for them, I think were some of the questions that we've also had. So it was great. And now that we've gone through this with you, I agree with one of the other members of the class. I really think I need to go back and reread it now again. And realize, and also it's amazing how much of the Aqdas was already translated, and how much the Guardian, you know, had interwoven into gleanings and many of his other writings, you know, the words of the Aqdas. So it doesn't, once you start looking at it, it doesn't seem to be so foreign or you know, hard to understand. Well, it is hard to understand if you want to really dig in on it, but thank you anyway. Thank you so much for personalizing
Oh, thank you,
this
Kathleen.
great book.
Thank you.
Manisha, please unmute yourself.
Oh, thank you, Nida Jan. Thank you so much. Yes, absolutely. Nothing to add, basically. I'm so appreciative. I couldn't be present, but I listened to every session, and it was wonderful. Thank you so much. On fear of God, so many wonderful things on the note. Also, Baha'u'llah says the essence of wisdom is fear of God. And when I reflect upon it, maybe a wise man doesn't break the laws of the material world in order not to hurt his body. We don't jump off the cliff. That's the law of creation. Also, on the spiritual world, we don't break the laws of God, and that will hurt the growth of our soul and our spiritual life. And that has to be to bring fear to our heart, either breaking the laws of creation in this world for our body, passing that red light that it was mentioned, jumping off the cliff, or the laws of spiritual hope, which are brought by God. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, your comments reminded me that the hand of the cause of God, Mr. Sears once said, "You don't break the laws of God, you break yourself against them."
Mm.
Well put in simple words.